Hey guys, I wanted to throw an unusual idea at you. I've been watching some other YouTubers for other games, and there's one thing that they do that I kind of want to get into doing a little bit, which is just kind of talking about some things in HOTS that people don't generally talk about, and maybe some bringing up some ideas that are just a little different. One of the things I was watching, it was this Magic Gathering YouTuber, and he was just like, he's talking about, he's like, oh, should there be more cards banned in Commander? And he brought up some good reasons why, some good reasons why not. It was a fun video to watch, so I kind of want to start doing a little bit more of that. There's only so many videos I can make when the heroes don't change that much, right? Whenever there's a balance patch, I try to make a video of the updated ones if it made a big enough difference. But again, like, there's only so much you can do on that. So with that being said, I want to talk today about summoner abilities or summoner spells. And what a summoner spell is in the game League of Legends, which is another MOBA. It's in the same genre. Heroes of the Storm was inspired a lot by what League of Legends did. And when Heroes of the Storm actually first came out, they had their own variations of summoner spells, which were then moved into the talent area of the heroes. And each hero of a role would have that talent as a potential, and then it was slowly moved out. Some just lost those summoner abilities. Some of them got them transformed into hero specific versions, or honestly some of them still have it, like cleanse. With that being said, though, I'm going to talk a little bit about the summoner abilities that are in League of Legends, and I'm going to explain, and we're just going to talk a little bit about what would happen in Heroes of the Storm if we had those abilities. So, in League of Legends, starting off with the most popular is Flash. Flash has become kind of synonymous with League of Legends. If you think about League of Legends, you probably think about Flash. These crazy plays made where someone teleports a short distance, lands an ability that they would have otherwise missed, and gets a kill, and they talk about that being like these huge plays. Maybe the Flash baits, where you move into a position where the enemies are about to flash, and then you flash at the exact same time, burning their flash and allowing your team's jungler to gank where they don't have an escape anymore. Flash is just one of those things that everyone knows. Now, in order to discourage people from picking Flash, they've reduced the range, they've increased the cooldown, they've given more people mobility, more options, and Flash is still being picked on probably 95% of the roster, with exceptions being heroes that kind of have their own version of Flash. Yumi, because she gets the flash that her ally gets. Shaco, because he kind of has his own version of Flash. And then some highly mobile heroes that gain benefits from gaining movement speed instead. Like Hecarim, his meta build runs Ghost instead of Flash, because that Ghost can increase your damage. So there's very few that go with anything else. Flash is one of those abilities that a lot of people have discussed, and a lot of League of Legends YouTubers have talked about, and they said, like, how would League of Legends change if Flash didn't exist? I think it definitely adds a lot of fun when it comes to watching players that are a little bit more skilled, how they use Flash. I think it's a really cool aspect to see, hey, I win this next trade, and if I win this next trade, he's going to be left with this much health. If I can wait for my cooldown to roll, I could just Flash and kill him. Like, the better players generally know how to use Flash to lead to more kills, and they can use it in a really cool way. But at the same time, seeing 10 people with Flash is almost like seeing no one with Flash. So that kind of gets you to the point of, well, what if Flash didn't exist? And I'm kind of doing the same thing in HOTS, explaining, like, well, what if these did exist? But that's Flash. Teleport, you can teleport to anything allied with a health bar, except for heroes. So you can go to, like, allied wards, allied minions, allied towers, and you can teleport to them from the other side of the map. Very long cooldown, decent channel time. I think its channel time is 4 seconds. It says it right there. I should have just read. Let me zoom in so you guys can see these, and I need to move over a little bit. Can I move over? Nope, I cannot. Let me just scroll up a little bit. Smite is generally a thing for the jungler. The camps in League of Legends spawn so often that you can dedicate an entire role to clearing camps. So Smite's something that allows you to get that last hit on something, because the camps in League of Legends give you the reward on the last hit. They don't give you the reward on channeling the camp afterwards. So if you wanted to like steal a camp from an enemy, if you're in Here's a Storm, you might jump on the camp and knock them away right as they finish the camp so you can steal the camp. In League of Legends, you could use Smite to do the last bit of damage to kill an important camp. Or you can use Smite to save the camp so that the enemy can't smite it. Cleanse is a personal thing that works just like the cleanse and HotS. It's just that it's only on yourself, and then it reduces the duration of CCs that are about to happen to you for the next 3 seconds. Ignite is like what Envenom used to be in Here is the Storm. It's an activatable that you can point and click on someone, deal a decent amount of damage. It's kind of a high amount in the early portions of the game, a rather low amount in the later portions of the game, but it also lowers the amount of healing that they receive by a little bit while you activate it. Mark and Dash are both things that are not in the actual game. They're only in another mode. Exhaust, you activate it on someone, it slows them by 30% and reduces their damage by 40%. Barrier, you shield yourself for a decent amount, rather low cooldown on Barrier. Ghost, you increase your movement speed. And then Heal, you heal yourself and heal an ally, and then you also give both targets movement speed. Clarity restores 50 mana, and then also gives 25% mana to nearby allies. So it could be a bunch of nearby allies. So let's talk a little bit about these summoner abilities and why I want these in Here's a Storm. Well, not necessarily these ones, but I want some in Here's a Storm. And my reasoning for this is because it's going to allow you to have more power on your own, more answers on your own. So because the competitive scene is kind of fallen away a little bit, we still have a competitive scene, but for the most part it's fallen away. A lot of people are just playing Storm League, and one of the most annoying ways to lose a game is when you are locking in for your draft, you pick something that you know your team needs, you look away, you look back, and you realize that your team's lacking a huge portion of things that your team actually needs. Maybe you're on a map that's a soaking heavy map and your team brought no wave clear. Maybe you're on a map that's camp heavy map and you brought no camp clear. And you just picked a tank, something that your team still needed, but can't really cover a lot of wave clear, camp clear. I mean, unless you're picking Joanna, which is part of the reason that we have such a stale tank meta, is the tanks that are very popular, tanks that can answer a lot of situations. And they usually have a wave clear. The most popular tanks right now, Joanna and ETC, have enough wave clear they could double soak. And then after that, it drops down a little bit, but that's one huge aspect on why a lot of these tanks aren't played. Same thing with the Soul Lane. Soul Lane's really popular right now to double soak. And so if you are bringing a lot of... if you're on a map that needs double soak, it's like, yeah, you definitely want to draft something with double soak, but what if you really needed something else, right? So you're very limited in what you can do. Maybe the enemy drafts something that you just can't handle in your role. And then when you ask your team, hey, we really need to counter this, and if they don't pick anything that counters it, you're just done. So, for example, in League of Legends, Master Yi is one of those that if you don't answer him, he can wipe your entire team. But in League of Legends, there's Thornmail that can answer him, which is something that will deal damage back to you while you're dealing damage to him, or while he's dealing damage to you. He'll take damage back. It'll lower his self-healing. There's answers and items. But even outside of that, when I play League of Legends, and I play both games a decent amount, if the enemy picks Master Yi, I'm picking Exhaust. Yeah, the slow portion won't work, but reducing his damage by 40% usually allows us just enough time to react so we can still deal with him. And so that's kind of the cool part, is like, you can have that answer on anyone. I could be playing a support and grab Exhaust, or I could be playing a solo lane and grab Exhaust. Because at the end of the game, when we have to face this Master Yi that can 3-shot everyone, I could do that 40% damage reduction on him, and suddenly it takes 5 or 6 hits to kill someone. And that's the power of this, right? This is where these are so great. You go against double healer, Ignite, you can take that on any roll. And so it's the same thing. Well, now you can turn off that extra healing, or at least double healer turns into a single healer, because I believe Ignite reduces the healing by 50%, might be 40%. But that's a thing. You have an answer. So what I'm getting at is there are a lot of answers available in this, but then there's also the playmaking. I've talked about how Flash adds a lot of playmaking. So if you don't need to answer anything on the opposing team, you can take something that allows your hero to do something else, or do it to a greater extent, having, again, more impact on yourself rather than your team. And that's something that a lot of people complain about Heroes of the Storm. They say, oh, it's a team-based game, but there's not enough impact that you can do on your own. And while I agree, I also agree to the extent where it's like, I've played a Smurf, I've gone from Bronze to Masters, I did the whole thing with like 78% win rate, so it's like, it's definitely a game that you can still carry to Masters with, but at the end of the day, like, it still would be fun to be able to outplay people because you picked something that they weren't expecting, or you picked something that you just know how to play it out a little bit better. It would give so much more depth to each hero in the game if they had more that they can choose, and would allow more counterplay. So if you're ever going against like a heavy mobile team, instead of nerfing all of the mobility heroes in the game, which is kind of been Blizzard's answer to a lot of things, right? Double healer got really popular. Support Apocalypse happened, where they nerfed all the healers, and in fact they nerfed them so much the pros started scrimming without healers. They were using Abathur main healer. They were using ETC main healer. They were using Yrel main healer. And you'll go, wait, Yrel main healer? Yeah, she has a talent at level 4 that when you pop your trait, it heals people. Well, that talent used to heal for a lot more, but they had to nerf it. Because instead of answering... So the way that they answered support Apocalypse, or the way they answered double support hitting the meta, was nerfing all the supports. The way that they answered the fact that people stopped using supports is by nerfing everyone's self-healing. And then supports came back into the meta. It was like, instead of nerfing everything, leave it where it is and give counterplay. Because it's lame when there's a cool strategy that's nerfed just because there's no counterplay. Give it counterplay. In World of Warcraft, the opposite kind of happened. Between the BC and Wrath, there was this situation, and I might have the times wrong, but there was this time where in PvP, Affliction Warlocks were rather weak, because everything they would do would just get dispelled. It would just get purified or whatever. It would get removed. So what happened was they started buffing Affliction so much that they had to... I mean, those Warlocks were able to pretty much like 1v5 people who didn't have a Dispel. And then finally they realized, like, okay, this is not the answer for it. And they gave them a spell, I believe it was a talent, that allowed them to, if that was dispelled, the caster would be silenced. The dispeller would be silenced. And yeah, I think this might have been actually at BC when this happened. But so they gave them that. So now they could actually balance Warlocks normally, because it came down to counterplay. Well, if you cast too many spells before you cast that, and it's removed early, then like if they're removed before they cast that last spell, then they're removed and you have to recast everything. But if you cast that one first, they can let it time out, or they can activate something to stay alive a little bit longer, and then they can remove all the rest of them when that one's gone. And so it became mind games. It became like a little game of chess. And the same idea, when CC started getting really bad, instead of just nerfing all CC, which they ended up kind of doing later, they added diminishing returns, and they also added PvP trinkets that allowed you to remove all CC. And so World of Warcraft always tried to balance by giving more counterplay. One person would get more counterplay in this direction, which means that the other person who got nerfed the most by giving the counterplay here would gain some counterplay in this direction. And it went back and forth like that, making it easier to balance, because anytime that you wanted to make something cool, you just gave everyone else more counterplay to the thing cool that you made. Well, in Heroes of the Storm, we have this problem where whenever anything cool happens, if that becomes meta, it gets nerfed until it's not cool. Genji's really cool in Overwatch. Genji's not very cool in Heroes of the Storm. He was very cool. He was this divey assassin that could quickly jump in, get a kill, hop away. But they nerfed his damage to the point that you jump in, you can almost never get a kill before you die. And you have to rely so much on your team getting value off of it. And they need to get everyone low, then you go for the kills. So that's where the problem was, is instead of giving counterplay against mobile heroes, they just nerfed every mobile hero. In fact, Mockery did this like thing for a long time where he would just be like, and here's a tracer nerf, and 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 he just kept explaining all of them. He had like this whole list of all of Tracer's nerfs that just kept happening. He's like, when are they going to buff her? And they didn't actually really give her a good buff until the rework. And so that was kind of the issue, is again, instead of giving an answer to heavy mobile heroes, they just nerfed them to the ground. And then they're not fun. So this is where I want to give a counter, and this is why I kind of like summoner spells. A lot of times, if you ask people about champions in League of Legends, they'll be like, oh, that's overpowered, that's overpowered, that's overpowered. In fact, it's actually surprisingly common in my Discord that if you bring up probably 60% of the League of Legends roster, someone's going to say they're overpowered. But there's counterplay to them. There's ones that heal a little too much. You go against Zac, everyone's like, oh, he's overpowered because he heals too much. Or Mundo, he's overpowered because he heals too much. Well, you run Ignite. Then you go against Master Yi, and they're like, oh, he's overpowered because he does too much damage too fast. Well, Exhaust. Then you go against someone where they're like, oh, they just do too much burst damage. Barrier. You mentioned, like they just have way too much CC. Cleanse. There's an answer to just about everything in these summoner spells. And that's the same thing. Whenever there were strong heroes in Heroes of the Storm, they just got nerfed. But what if they didn't? What if the fun playstyles that felt really impactful if you did everything right didn't get nerfed? Kel'Thuzad is one of those. That, man, he used to be able to one-shot two different people at the same time, no matter what role they were. But what if everyone had a self-cleanse? Or what if everyone had cleanse? What if everyone had barrier? There would be more counterplay. You could leave them strong, and there would be more counterplay. So let's talk about some of the abilities that could be added into Heroes of the Storm, because I don't want to just grab all of them from League of Legends. I want to talk about ones that already existed in Heroes of the Storm, and ones that could potentially exist in Heroes of the Storm to answer problems that have previously happened. So, we have Envenom. Envenom, I think, should be Heroes of the Storm's answer to Ignite. It should do pretty much the same thing. Envenom was a talent that you used to be able to take, and let me see if I can pull it up. Where is Envenom? Why am I not seeing Envenom? Was it... I know it was changed. Should be similar to Blood for Blood. So let me pull up Blood for Blood. Blood for Blood is essentially Thrall's ancestral healing. But yeah. Thrall's ancestral, Diablo's Lord of Terror. Basically that. But there was a talent called Envenom that a lot of people had that was just a damage over time. Oh, here it is, Envenom. Okay, so Envenom, all Envenom is it's a cooldown, 60-second cooldown, activate to poison enemy hero doing 352 damage, and it scales over 10 seconds. So this was a talent that was very powerful, but it wasn't very meta, because you had to take it, and it would replace another talent that you would have to take. But what if it was just something that anyone could take? It would allow, let's say, a hero that is very close to having a 100-0 combo, would allow them to have a 100-0 combo. But they would have to give up some more important talents. So let's talk about some of the talents they would have to give up. Because again, my idea for this is that everyone gets to pick one in draft, and then you also get to pick one later in the game. So you pick one in draft to determine, like, what you might be lacking in draft. Then you get to pick another one later in the game when you could look at it and go, okay, we've been losing fights in this way, let's take this to see if we can answer that. But even though you might be able to answer what the enemies are bringing, they get more tools to answer the game, or to answer whatever you're bringing to the table. So let's talk about it for a little bit. Envenom, I think, should be like Ignite. Reducing healing, that would answer double support. You wouldn't need to just nerf supports. If you want to run double support, you can, but if we see double support, we might have 3 or 4 people taking Envenom, so you got to be careful about that. Scouting Drone. Scouting Drone was kind of Heroes of the Storm's version of Ward. It was very popular for Malfurions to take it because their early talents weren't that strong. And it was great for maps that you could turn in. Like it was great for like Tomb of the Spider Queen, where you could turn in either top or you could turn in bottom, and you'd put a scouting drone on both of those, and then you could see where the enemies tried to turn in, and you'd walk over and quickly interrupt them. It was worth it to not take a talent just so you could get that talent on that map because of that feature. Having that as a talent or a summoner ability, and in this case we're going to start calling them Nexus abilities, just so that they're a little bit more Heroes of the Stormy. But yeah, if Scouting Drone was a Nexus ability, it would actually be pretty cool, because you'd have to give up things like Envenom or Cleanse or Bribe in order to get the ability to stall them out on those objectives. So it'd be very map specific, but in the competitive scene, there were a lot of times where people would take vision related talents over other talents just so that they had that capability. It was very popular in the competitive scene for Lucios to take Boombox, drop it in a bush when they go do a camp, and the Boombox would reveal if anyone tried to go in that bush. So having Scouting Drone available on a wide variety of heroes would actually change a lot of what happens in the competitive environment, which would be kind of cool. This would be essentially a dead talent in normal games, but it would be cool in the competitive environment. Then we have Cleanse. There's been a huge debate on whether or not all supports need Cleanse. My rule of thumb was like, oh, if the support has a major engage that they can do on their own, they don't need Cleanse. And if they don't, then Cleanse would be cool because it allows them to counter engage. But I like the idea of also just having to pick Cleanse and have that as a potential that you can cleanse an ally, but make it a longer cooldown if it's something that everyone can have as early as level 1. But the cool part is, one of the annoyances about when Cleanse was available on a lot of heroes is it was a requirement to take. So when they started removing Cleanse from different heroes, they started having more build paths and more things that you could do with your talents. But then we created a lot of heroes that they had to balance around, because what ended up happening was like, if the enemy took a hero that didn't have Cleanse and you picked Sylvanas with Mind Control, you just kind of won. And old Sylvanas' Mind Control was a long-range point-and-click ability that allowed you to control someone for like 3 seconds, so you could just move them right into your team and they could just die. The best answer to it was Cleanse, because you literally just click Cleanse. They didn't need to worry about Mind Control anymore. Same thing, Varian's Taunt, what used to be level 10, used to be a lot stronger. And what ended up happening was, when they started removing Cleanse from a lot of people, whenever you picked a Varian, whenever they pick something without Cleanse, you just pick Varian and you just won the fight. And that's really boring. To be able to just win in draft is very, very boring. Counterplay is fun. Being able to pick something and counter another thing that the enemy team is doing is fun. I think everyone should have the ability to take Cleanse if they want it. And then it gives more build variety for those heroes that did just have Cleanse. Like Rhaegar could actually pick one of his other 2 talents, which would be awesome. Farsight, similar to Scouting Drone, it's just a ranged one that doesn't have that has a longer cooldown, and it doesn't last forever. I feel like Farsight would be another cool one to have in the competitive scene. Probably wouldn't be picked at all in the non-competitive scene. Bribe, I'm going to set next to Burning Rage in the basic idea of, you get a talent that allows you to answer something that either your hero is lacking or your team is lacking. You get a team that doesn't have Wave Clear, Burning Rage. You get a team that doesn't have Camp Clear, Bribe. This, again, it puts more power to you and less power to your team. And it allows it to where if your team's not playing correctly, you can kind of answer that at the cost of losing something for team fights. And Burning Rage would bring a little bit to team fights, but we can make it double the value against minions or something. But having Ice Block or having Envenom would be much more valuable in team fights. So even if your team drafts poorly, you have not a great answer, but you have a little bit of an answer at the cost of you might lose team fights. So I think this would be a really cool thing, because it gets you closer to answering what your team needs. Because if your team picked no Wave Clear, most likely they're going to have a better team fight, or hopefully they're going to have a better team fight. So now you have the Wave Clear that's needed, and then hopefully your team has good enough Wave Clear that or good enough team fight, you don't need to take like Envenom or Ice Block. Promote, if you guys are unfamiliar with Promote was a talent that said it had 2 charges and a 30-second cooldown. You activate it to cause an allied lane minion to take less damage and to deal more damage. So you would drop the damage it takes by more than half, and then you would double its damage. And it was cool. It was really cool. It only reduced the damage of non-heroes. So if you promoted something, a hero could still kill it just as fast. But non-heroes, it would allow you to like really add pressure to another lane on maps where there's not necessarily camp. Like it gets kind of obvious, right? Like the game turns into kind of the same thing over and over and over, where you're on Battlefield of Eternity and everyone knows when to get the camps the right times, or they distract during the objective. You're on Volskaya, everyone knows when to get the sentry camps, so they distract. But the sentry camp only ever pushes in top. Well, what if the objective's in top and a whole bunch of promoted minions get spawned in the bottom lane or show up in the bottom lane? And now your bottom lane's getting pushed really hard during that objective. It's pretty much the same as a camp, but you got to create the camp that you wanted. So again, you would lose potential in team fights by not taking Envenom or by not taking Ice Block, but you would gain potential in macro. And that would be a huge amount of potential too, because a lot of people don't know, but the ranged minions already do like double damage to structures, and they already do a lot of damage. So to double that double damage means that ranged minions are going to be just dumping damage into structures. And you could even buff one melee minion, one ranged minion, so the melee minion can tank longer because it's going to be taking 75% reduced damage. Maybe you get a catapult early in a lane, bump up a catapult, and then also bump up a melee minion. And that catapult doing double damage is going to do an insane amount of damage. So those are the things that could allow for a lot more individual impact in game. Even if you're not playing a macro hero, you could do something like that to set up an amazing distraction during an objective, even if there's not a camp in that lane. It allows more individual play, and it's not so predictable. So that's what would be really cool about that. Ice Block. Ice Block is just, in my opinion, it's something that everyone should have the capability of buying. In League of Legends, everyone can buy a stopwatch. And so if anyone has like way too much burst, or if anyone has any answers, or you just want to make a big play, you have the stopwatch. Everyone should have the choice of taking Ice Block at the cost of you won't have Envenom, you won't have Remote, you won't have Burning Rage, you won't have Imposing Presence, all of those. Burning Rage. Explain the reasoning for it. Imposing Presence, this is going to be kind of just my answer for Exhaust, but I wouldn't mind having an Exhaust in this game. We did have a Pacify for a while, which I don't know if we have anymore. I think there's different versions of it now. But let's see, Shrink Ray is what it used to be called. So Shrink Ray activates to reduce the damage and movement speed of target enemy heroes by 50%. Now there's modified versions, right? There's Debilitating Dart, there's Pacify, there's Harsh Moonlight, there's Well Met, there's Subjugation. And then it used to exist on Task, Malfurion, and Lili. So, again, Heroes of the Storm used to have summoner abilities. They were just shoved in talents, and I really believe that they could re-enter the game and be very effective. So I wouldn't mind if Shrink Ray existed instead of Imposing Presence. Now, there's big options as well. Now, I say these are big options because these are like either later talents or they're just, in my opinion, too powerful to just be given as a normal thing. Because if you add Bolt, it's going to be like Flash from League of Legends. Everyone's going to take it. But Bolt of the Storm is an ability that's still on ETC and allows him to teleport a decent distance. Then he uses it to get these huge mosh plays. Well, imagine if everyone could take Bolt. He goes for a Bolt play and then everyone bolts away when he tries to mosh. Bolt could be a really cool one, but I really think that it should be better as a later level talent, which is why I think that one of these should be picked in draft, or at least at the start of the game, and the other one should be like a level 18 option, or a level 19 option, something that's like a little bit before late game, and you could have some bigger options like Mule, you could have Healing Totem, you could have Storm Shield, you could have Bolt. 5 healing totems would be insane. 5 mules on a core would really reduce the chance that you lose on a core push. 5 bolts to get away from a mosh, like these would be the big ones. Or you could still pick one of the smaller ones, and there is also the potential that you could maybe like upgrade the first one that you took. So where like Cleanse, you can take at level 1, but then let's say you want to take Cleanse again at a higher level, you could cut the cooldown in half and give it 2 charges. Right? You could buff up the things that you have. In Venom, instead of it reducing healing by 50%, it reduces healing by 100% for a short duration. Ice Block could be a different version of it, could be whatever. Now, with Ice Block, like, we don't remove the Ice Block from Jaina. And the same thing, anyone who already has one of these, we don't necessarily need to remove them. Healing Totem used to exist on a bunch of different heroes. And then Rhaegar always had the best one. His was always a shorter cooldown than everyone else's. And it's the same idea. You could have a shorter cooldown cleanse, or you could take a different talent. So with Rhaegar, you could choose not to take cleanse at level 1 and just take cleanse at level 7. Then with Rhaegar, you could take something else. I mean, what would Rhaegar be like with, Shrink Ray? Or with Promote, right? You could still do that. We don't even need to change any talent in the game. You could have those talents and your other ones, because Totem already existed, and Rhaegar had the best one. It had the lowest cooldown, so he wouldn't need to take Healing Totem. And same thing, Mule already exists. You wouldn't take it on Abther. If anything, you could even make it to where people who have those talents can't take those talents. So that's the basic idea of those, is that we'll have some talents you can pick in the early game, some talents you can pick in the late game. Now, I want to add in 2 more that are just my personal recommendations. One has a very important reason for it, and the other one I will talk about a little bit. So, Barbed Chains. Barbed Chains is when, again, highly immobile heroes, we never actually found a good answer to that. We just nerfed them down to the ground, and now they just aren't played that much. But what if there was a really good answer? What if instead of nerfing Genji to the point that nobody wants to play him, what if there was an answer where you could throw chain at Genji, and when it hits him, if he leaves the range of that chain, he gets silenced and he takes a huge portion of his health. And so he could still leave the fight, but he's definitely not coming back in the fight. Or he can stay, and if he stays, your team can go and try to kill him. And if your team does a lot of damage to him and then he leaves the chain because he's like, whoa, I can't actually take this much damage, silence, dead. And Barbed Chains could have a really long cooldown, but it could allow you that impact that would really change the game, and would allow you that counterplay to then answer these heavy mobile comps. So instead of just nerfing heavy mobile comps and heavy mobile heroes, give an answer. I think most tanks don't really need to take a lot of these other talents, so having the ability to grab Barbed Chains on a tank would really change things up. But you're also at that point where, like, if the enemies pick high mobility, it's like anyone can pick chains at that point. If they're going to dive in the backline every time, and you're playing a healer, pop chains on them. I mean, you could also just pop ice block so that Genji dives in, you ice block, and then he has to wait 3 seconds or he dies. That's 3 seconds that your tank could walk back and hit chains on him. So that's kind of the big thing on that. That's what I think would be really, really powerful. EMP is a different idea, and my idea for EMP was to turn off structures. If everyone has the potential of having Mule, I feel like having the ability to have EMP on someone would be very good. EMP as a talent could add a lot of potential to doing things again on your own. You can jump on someone, take them out, and then in your lane, what normally stops you from pushing is the towers. And so if you start winning in the solo lane, you can't really do much. However, if you start winning in the solo lane and you're using EMP, you can kill the enemy laner, and then you can turn off their structures and you can push a bunch, get a lot of work done, and you can be more impactful in the solo lane. So it answers one of the big problems that a lot of people have been complaining about, is that while there's a big roster pool for solo laners, there's no real incentive to trying to get any kills. There's no real incentive to trying to do anything of value, because it's better to try to freeze the lane than it is to push. Well, I think freezing the lane is still a good strategy, but having something like EMP could give you a lot more impact on your own in the solo lane. And then my last option that I would add to this is we already have an answer to double healer. We already now have an answer to high mobile. Well, if we added all of these, we'd have an answer to double heal, we'd have an answer to highly mobile. The only thing we wouldn't have an answer to is like big health tanks. And like double bruiser. One of the highest win rate compositions when I looked up on HotS was a tank, 2 bruisers, 1 assassin, and a healer. And I was like, that's a really beefy team. We don't really have an answer for that. If that becomes the meta, I don't want them just nerfing all the bruisers and nerfing all the tanks. Instead, I would like something to answer that. Maybe a zone that you could put down that does percent health damage. I'm not really sure. Honestly, I don't know the best answer to that. But this is my idea. And again, this isn't really an actual idea that's ever going to enter the game. This is me just brainstorming out loud what it would be like to have summoner abilities in Heroes of the Storm, specifically using summoner abilities that have already existed. The only two that I've shared that haven't existed is Barb, Chains, and EMP, with the exception of I would add something else to Envenom. Everything else has already existed in Heroes of the Storm. It's just now you're giving this option to everyone. And sure, you could give specific options to some people so you don't get a lot of like repeats. Like 5 healing totems would be kind of overpowered. 5 Envenoms would probably be pretty strong. But if everyone's using Envenom on someone, you just pop Ice Block, there goes all the Envenoms. So it would definitely be a back and forth. And Envenom's slow damage. If you have a good healer, then you can just heal through Envenom. So it's one of those things that it's like, it would definitely need some balance if it was something that they wanted to look at. But all of these have already existed in the game at some point. They were in the form of summoner abilities at some point. And a lot of people in each of these roles had those. With that being said, this is just a fun idea to get people thinking a little bit, thinking out loud, and having fun with it. It's never going to actually reach the game, and that's perfectly fine. The devs are always working on things, keeping it creative, having fun. I'm not a game developer. Me saying, oh, I'll grab this from this game and put it in this game, it'll be fun. Is again, I don't have the information that would say whether or not. I do think it would be cool, just because like I play League of Legends and I play Heroes of the Storm. There's some things that I love about League of Legends, and there's some things that I just don't love about League of Legends. And a lot of people will say, like, when I bring up an idea, like, I really think this from League of Legends should be in HotS. People are always like, no, that's going to make it too much like League of Legends. But then, like, League of Legends will take ideas from HotS, and no one's complaining in HotS. Or no one's complaining in League. It's okay to try something new. It's okay to pull something from another game. I'm perfectly fine with taking things that people love about a game and using it in other games. That's what inspiration's all about. That's what building on a game is all about. World of Warcraft has taken ideas from games that were WoW killers, right? They've taken ideas from other games all the time, and they've advanced and they've learned from it. In fact, their entire new leveling path in Legion was stolen from Guild Wars 2. Their new leveling style was stolen from Guild Wars 2. So, with that being said, or it might not have been Legion, it was the one before it. It was Warlords of Draenor. It was like literally the same thing as the Heart Quests, or it was the same thing as events in there. And World Quest, the whole idea of World Quests was already in Guild Wars 2. It's okay to take things. No one complained and said, oh, well, now WoW is going to be Guild Wars 2. I don't think this is what defines League of Legends. People like League of Legends because it's a heavy laning game that has a lot of individual skill as far as mechanics. They like the gold in the item system. I think items would fit pretty cool in Heroes of the Storm, but that's where you would be kind of pushing a little bit further towards League. I think summoner abilities, especially since it fits so well into the talent system that we already have, and we've already had those in the game, I think that it would be a cool feature, and at the very least, it would be fun to try for a season. With all these anomalies that are going on, I think it would be a cool anomaly to have a level 0 talent that you gotta choose. And then like a level 18 talent. And then these are things that everyone gets to choose from. But at the end of the day, again, nothing is going to happen from this, and I'm perfectly okay with that. It was just something fun that I wanted to do, and I'm hoping to do some more videos like this. Maybe not ideas for the game, but just discussions of, like, what if? Or discussions of, like, the meta. I did that video on the tank meta, and it'd be fun to see. But either way, thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to check out any of my other videos. You can subscribe, you can like, whatever. Don't forget, I still do coaching. And I've got a Patreon, so if you want to support or you want to get coached, the Patreon's there. All of that info should be down there in the description. Make sure to check out all of that. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching.